All right, so let's talk about how the devil is going to attack your restoration and your reconciliation, okay? So me and my spouse was on the way to restoration, so we were in reconciliation. Now, when we were in reconciliation, he was under judgment, okay? Follow me, all right? Keep up with me. When we were in reconciliation, he was still being humbled by God, all right? So his humility brought him to obedience. Now, remember when we were learning that judgment brings us to repentance and obedience. So God was humbling him so that he could do the right thing by his wife and he can do the right thing by God. Okay? So follow me. During this time, I was still being obedient to God and we were moving forward better than ever. Okay? So this is like when the counterfeit left, like God literally did what he said, but we were on our way to full restoration, and he was in agreement with working things out and being obedient to God. However, God was still humbling him, okay? He was learning from his mistakes while we were being reconciled. I hope that makes sense. So he was still under judgment. He was being humbled, and we were still reconciling. Now, during this time, God was using me to help him. Okay, so this is the part where he realized my value. This is the part where his eyes was opening. All right. So this is also the part where the enemy was attacking me and him and bringing up things from the past. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you that we both literally were saying out of our mouth that because in the past this happened and because you did this in the past, our hearts wanted to make things work. But because we had such a traumatic past together, the enemy was using that against us. So he was fearful, all right? He was fearful. He was guarded, and I had to pray for him. And I was struggling with, is he going to leave again? Will there be another woman? Like, I really psychologically and mentally was struggling, okay? I was struggling because I had such a traumatic past with all of my relationships in my life, okay? So I could see God restoring, but the enemy would bring things to my unhealed areas in my heart and in my mind. And I used to just bust out and cry randomly without him even knowing because I never healed from it. So I was crying because of fear, all right? And God had to help me remove that fear because I did not want my heart to be broken again. I literally lived in a state of, I was spiritually strong, but I had never reached a place where I was about to live what God had promised. But my mind, I believed God, I knew God, I knew how to pray, but my mind needed help, okay? So I had to continuously go to God and pray and ask God for help, okay? Because I did not want, because the enemy was bringing things to my mind, and I just used to look at my spouse sideways. And sometimes, I would slip up and I would mess up, and, God was working on him enough to where he understood why I was having these episodes. So he would call it episodes, right? He would call them Raven episodes, okay? And God was making him, causing him to say things and do things to kind of help me in my mind to know that he was with me for real this time and that he wasn't going to leave me. So I suffered really bad from abandonment issues and rejection issues, and I had to go to God. The number one thing that God dealt with is the communication. We had to properly communicate with each other. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. God has literally made me and my husband's, like, we cannot be together without God. What was happening in our restoration and in our reconciliation was that we kept reaching places where we had no solution on our own, and we ultimately resulted in praying together. Okay, so he would say how he feels, I would say how I feel, and psychologically we didn't know how to move forward because we both dealt with trauma. So we resulted into praying together and making a decision to stay together, but literally pray about this area and leave it to God. That's literally what we did, okay? That's literally what we did. Anytime we would come together, and especially when the enemy would attack what God was doing, we would come together and just pray, and we made a choice to just stay together, okay? I'm going to tell you this now. God is going to get your husband, your spouse, to that place, okay? Everybody's judgment is different, all right? But God will humble them so that they can see what they need to do, all right? It's worth the fight. Keep fighting for their understanding and for their obedience. But I'm telling you, the enemy is going to try to attack the reconciliation and restoration. It was as if we were getting closer and closer, and something would happen to do this. So it's like we were getting closer and closer, and something would happen for us to take us back. And I was still fragile. I was a prayer warrior. But that part of, like, the trauma in my mind, the enemy was using that against me. And I had to really deal with that. I had to pray about it. I had to make a decision to trust God. That was a very scary decision, to trust God, because sometimes God put you through tests. I was like, God, I don't want any more tests. Like, don't test me in this area. Please heal me and move us forward. So I'm making this video to let you know that God is going to help y'all move forward, but you have to keep fighting. My situation looked impossible, okay? God had brought my husband to a point where he was in agreement with the will of God for his life, okay? So I encourage you to keep being obedient and pray over the communication, and don't give up. If you don't know how to communicate with your spouse at all, I have an ebook called Restoring Harmony. It is in the link in my bio. It will teach you how to communicate with your spouse while they're in their rebellion and with restoration. It gives you everything you need, okay? I love you. It's in the link in my bio. I love you, and I pray you have a nice day. See you in the next video.